You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, humor-filling, motivation-loving life hacks and empowering tips for all of the medically adultish people in life. You know I'm Dominique Vale, founder of InvisiYouth Charity and your host for InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, and today is Season 5, Episode 64, and today's episode is going to be twice the amount of fun because I have two special guests with me today who are pros in the podcasting world, so I feel like now I'm going to be getting a little bit of a mini micro masterclass in podcasting, so I'm super excited about today's episode. We're with the creators and hosts of the Two Disabled Dudes podcast, Sean Baumstark and Kyle Bryant, both living with a rare disease called Friedreich's Ataxia, also known as FA, which affects balance, coordination, and can significantly impact neuromuscular control and physical abilities. Sean and Kyle are also connected in their enjoyment in the cycling community. They've competed in several long-distance bike rides like the Race Across America, which massive props to that as a whole. That was also part of an award-winning documentary, the Ataxian. Together, they started Two Disabled Dudes podcast in 2016, now with over 200 episodes, which is incredible, always to think of. They framed their podcast around interviewing guests across the rare disease, public speaking, athlete space, and beyond, and really fused together insightful conversation with humor so that every episode really gives a takeaway of living beyond one's circumstances, which I thoroughly love. Even some of our former guests on the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions have been guests on Two Disabled Dudes, which was quite fun for us. And I might be treating this as a potential audition for Kyle and Sean to be on their show. You never know, guys. They'll let me know how this goes at the end. But even beyond podcasting, between the two of them, they have Kyle has written a book, Sean, and launched a nonprofit as well. It's just incredible. On beyond this, the two of them have really defined what they can do on their own terms and allow all of their guests on Two Disabled Dudes to do the same. So I'm thrilled to have them be on InvisiYouth Chat Sessions. So guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're glad to be here.
First of all, you mentioned that we have over 200 episodes and this is going to be your masterclass. We still have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
So you may or may not learn anything right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll pick up something, trust me. Just the fact that you guys have better headphones than me is first tip number one I've learned.
Don't let the headphones trick you.
Yeah, I'll go on the opposite side of that spectrum. If you decide that it is pretty master class like, we'd like to know where to send the invoice. Not really.
Good call.
I love that. And guys, as always, I want to make sure that you subscribe to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions. I remind you at the top of the show, and you have a good 60 minutes to make sure you hit that button on any podcast platform or on YouTube while you're listening or watching. So make sure you do that before the end of the show. I'll remind you again. And we will go into our first segment called Chat Me Up.
Chat me up.
Hey, wanna chat?
Obviously, you knew I was going to pick the segment, guys, where it was titled about talking because the three of us do talking professionally. So we are going to go through the how-tos and tips on building a life with talking being a primary focus part of it. So I'm going to be chatting with Kyle and Sean on those different parts of it. So, Kyle, I wanted to ask, how did you guys get into podcasting and deciding that you wanted to create Two Disabled Dudes together?
So when we did Race Across America together, we were two people of a four-man team, and we also had a 13-person crew. I just had to mention all of that because it was quite a production, but the actual production part of it was that we also had a documentary crew with us during the race, and they produced an amazing documentary, and we were watching it and going, you know what? there's some, first of all, there's some pretty intense parts of the movie, and some sort of wisdom that comes out of like a really pressurized moment, right? And we're watching the movie for the 35th time because we get to watch it at film festivals and with different audiences. And we're going, you know what? There's stuff in this movie that we would love to talk about on a regular basis. And maybe even people would enjoy listening. I don't know if that has if that has happened, but we really do enjoy talking about some things that really go through our heads a lot, and are, you know, I guess I don't normally have these types of conversations about like real stuff, and you know, the 40 minutes or whatever of each podcast episode is sort of time that's set aside for us to like put everything down and be like, all right, what's going on lately, and what can we talk about that's gonna improve our lives.
No, I love that. And even Sean, on your end, what 200 episodes is a feat for in television, in podcasting. So what has made you guys want to keep doing this 200 episodes? Your 9th season, you just mentioned, just started dropping in February. So what has made you guys want to keep doing this and push even beyond 200?
I just can't get enough of Kyle. I just no, you know, the number one I think is probably true for both Kyle and I is community. You know, we don't have a million listeners or subscribers, but we said from the beginning, if this benefits one person, then it's worth it. And you know, every now and then we'll get texts or emails or a comment from, people we know, and sometimes total strangers just saying, hey, this episode spoke to me, or I appreciate you digging into this topic. So those types of comments and outreach, if you will, I think motivate us to keep trying, keep working at it. It's not a perfect science, but we're human. We're all flawed, and we're all trying to figure this out together. And it's a whole lot easier for me because Kyle, I have a partner, you know, and Kyle has somebody else. So we can sit in a room and bounce ideas off each other. Who knows if it's valuable, but I guarantee you it's a whole lot more valuable than if I were doing it by myself.
Well, and, you know, we've both talked about the fact that, like, we probably would have quit a long time ago if it weren't for both of us, like, being accountable to each other and keeping each other going.
Yeah.
That's so true. And I love how you said it built such a community, because something also that we were doing our pre-research on you guys was that both of you were diagnosed with FA in your late teens and 20s, which is our demographic of who we work with at InvisiYouth. So I wanted to know, do you feel that being diagnosed in that sort of young adulthood part of your lives, did that really shape how you guys were developing yourselves and who you've grown into being as you've become adults and who you are today?
I think that's accurate. You know, we're everyone is always like searching for purpose, but I think specifically that time in life is a little bit of a turning point, and to be coming to grips with a disability during that time, I think that's tough for everyone. And you know, Sean and I are old guys now, and we made it through that section of life. And so, you know, talking about the things that were hard is one of the things we love to do. It's a little bit I'm trying to think of the word, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah, Sean, would you agree?
Absolutely. I was diagnosed when I was 25. So I do recognize that it's probably different, right, than if you're diagnosed at 13 or in Kyle's case, I'm going to say 17. You know, I was done with high school. I had even completed my university years and was living life abroad, you know, had a great time for a year in Germany. So I feel like I had a vision for my life that was very specific, and I was on my way, right? And then all of a sudden a doctor says, oh, wait a minute, something's not right. And you begin to, at 25, thankfully, I feel like I had a decent foundation and a good grounding to take the time to reevaluate where I was going and how I was going to get there. So for me, I'm grateful. My diagnosis was later in life. I can imagine what it would be like at 10 or 12 to face this kind of diagnosis.
Yeah, because even I was 16, as our audience knows, when I got injured and developed my chronic illnesses and how that then began for me. So we'll always say that young adult age, it sort of it strips down very quickly the things that you might have used as buffers of just managing life, and it kind of just strips you down to what really are your values, what you love the most, because you have to manage what my energy and what my health is capable of letting me do every day. And I have a priority list of what matters the most to me. And so other things I might have in my late teens and 20s kind of done with friends or done other things because I wanted to fit in with my friends or do things because everyone else was doing them. I very quickly realized my health wasn't going to let me. And if I had to pick to use my energy, I was going to do it with the things I wanted to do the most. So like you both said too, you really do evaluate what you want to do the most and then kind of have to re-steer the lane in which you'll do those things, but managing it with your health or with your disability at the same time.
Yeah. I think it, in a way it focuses you, right? Because you're forced to like be like, all right, these things don't matter because I probably can't do those things. So I'm going to focus on what I can do, which is a little more narrow now. Yeah,
no, definitely. And even you guys talk a lot about your life and all the things that you do outside of podcasting. I mean, even just me reading your bio, podcasters tend to be very multi-hyphenated in the work that they do. That definitely is for the both of you. So have you found things that have worked for the both of you when it comes to balancing all of the different work that you're doing and balancing, because producing a podcast, as I know as well, is, and Sean's like, give me this one, Dominique. I will answer this one first as well.
No, ultimately, we've made it work for 6 years, but every season is tough. It's a lot of work, like you mentioned, day jobs, sleep, friends, family, all the different things that we have going on. I would say something that does make it a little more manageable: communication. We're constantly, even though we only record typically once a week, I probably talk to Kyle more than anybody in my life. It's a text every couple hours or a phone call every couple of days. Like, there's always something going on. And when we're both equally invested in something this important to us, it just requires that communication for staying on top of things and not letting the ball drop.
Yes.
I agree. We'll always, that work-life balance question will constantly come up for young people through us with the charity often, and I always say it's the worst answer to give, but scheduling and being very diligent in my scheduling is the only way to really have a multi-hyphenated way of working and doing multiple, if you are not in a typical 9 to 5 and that's your only work or type of career avenue you have. I'm very color coordinated in my scheduling. That has worked for me. It does not work for lots of people. It's very color coordinated. It's a little embarrassing. Sometimes I don't show people the schedule because it's very type A, but it's worked for.
I think, I'll add scheduling is key, very important, but also giving yourself permission to follow that schedule and nothing else. It's easy to say, all right, I'm gonna do an hour here, and then before you know it, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. And that's where I've had to really rein in myself, because Kyle and I do all of our own production, so we edit our episodes, and I'm sure when you start editing, it takes a while. It's never ending. You have an idea, you're like, you hear something, you're like, oh, what if I can move that over here? And just all kinds of work goes into it. And I've started to, just in the last year or so, tell myself, all right, I'm going to give it 60 minutes, and that's it. Once that 60-minute alarm goes off, it's time to go for a walk, or it's time to do my push-ups, or to go to bed, because everything matters, not just that one task or that one, episode or whatever it may be. And it's really easy, I think, for us to forget that everything matters.
Yeah. And I think, Sean, you talk about sort of drawing that line of like, all right, I'm done at 60 minutes. I think that's really hard. And you would admit that that's really hard, right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Because like Dominique was saying, we do have a lot of, we're multi-hyphenated. Sean and I both have full-time jobs. We have a few other things going on, and balancing all those things and drawing the line between those things is not easy. Yeah. And we just keep trying, I guess.
No, I think that's really important, because a lot of people will always, when they see people that are in a position of you guys have been doing, especially with two disabled dudes, you've been doing this for so long, people just think, oh, it's a well-oiled machine. You've probably figured this out years ago, and it's just easy. You're never going to change it. And it's true. You constantly are trying to evaluate what will work best and how to make things better for yourselves. And even the one thing I was going to end this segment on was asking, with the show, particularly with having so many episodes and different guests, you're always trying to figure out different topics you guys want to talk about. And for you, what are topics that make you guys the most amped up for an episode? Like when a guest is talking, that you get really excited when they're bringing up certain types of stories, or the way that they're telling parts of their life to you that get you the most excited as a host? I'll go to Kyle first, or Sean. They're both pensively looking, so I don't know who to go to first.
No, I think it's, I just like to talk to people who are not surface level, and who really dig deep into what they're doing, of course, but also into themselves, and really relate how they feel, which sounds weird, but how they feel to what they're doing. I think there's, when we can have that mix of, satisfying our own selves and our own feelings with also satisfying the requirements of the job that we do, or the activity that we're in, or the community that we're in. I think that's where I like to be, and I like to learn how other people accomplish that.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Very similar. I would also say I'm empowered by stories of achievement or overcoming. So when we're talking to somebody who, from our perspective or from the world's point of view, all the odds are stacked against them. There's just nothing is going to work in their favor, and they still resolve to make something phenomenal or beautiful about life, is inspiring to me. In fact, I got to give a shout out. Who's coming to mind right now is Joe Such. We had him on the show last year, and he runs a YouTube channel, Man Turning into Stone. And I know he has like a nickname handle, and I can't remember it right now, but what an incredible story. And when you look at him, it's easy to think, oh, he probably doesn't enjoy anything about life. But the guy's making it happen. He's taking control and he's producing some really cool stories and inspiring jokes and moments of laughter that caused me to realize life is good, and it's 100% what you make of it.
Yeah, that's really, for both of you. I loved how you said that as well, because it's nice when people realize that especially in the chronic illness and disability space, we'll always have a lot of our young adults want to fit the mold of what makes it easier for people around them to accept their illness and disability and help them the easiest way. And a lot of times that makes the authenticity of how they would react in situations or how they would live their life change a little bit, because they're trying to make everyone else comfortable to be around them. So that's something we'll always really encourage, is then those people aren't being the most supportive of you if you can't have a bad day. I always say all the time, I've run this charity for over 7 years. There are still days where I'm like, I cannot work. You cannot even attempt to get me, or I will be answering emails from bed and they will know. And I'm not going to hide it. It's the work that I do, but I'll always tell people all the time, you have to meet me where I'm at and be flexible. And if you can't do that right when we agree to start doing stuff together, then I would much rather you go find another group to work with or support, because I am not going to try to be the perfectly chronically ill founder for you.
Yeah.
I have to do what I'm good at and what I'm capable with.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, and I think that's before to end that segment, and before we go to our next one, something else that you guys know I thoroughly love is our subtle activism. As we tell you all the time, it is like the Starbucks cup in the back of a Game of Thrones scene. We like to make sure our activism is curiosity piquing and makes those conversations started. And that's why we have our InvisiYouth charity shop. You'll see that popping up next to me now. We have our subtle activist color block bracelets. I'm wearing a couple of them. If you're on YouTube, you can see me wearing those in our yellow and gray colors. They're handmade by our volunteers who have chronic illness and disability as well. And they are $4 on our Etsy page, and 100% of every sale goes directly towards helping fund our free resources and programs that we put out every month that are helping teens and young adults with chronic illness and disability figure out how they can thrive in their daily life and all of the non-medical aspects of it with their chronic illness and disability, and find that success and joy for themselves. So if you would like to buy a bracelet for yourself or someone you care about, like I said, $4 on our Etsy page. We do free global shipping right now, so get on it while that is still a thing. And our link will be in the show notes and description of the episode, so check it out if you would like one of our subtle activist bracelets as well. So you can wear one alongside me and quite a few other people that have them. And we will now go to another thing that you should be doing, is having a life playlist, and we will go into What's Your Life playlist.
What's your life playlist? What's your life playlist?
What's Your Life playlist is all about us getting to chat about some top ideas, equipment, and mindsets to make your life and your work the most empowering and thriving worthy for yourself. So we are going to talk with Sean and Kyle about that, how they have built work for themselves that has been something they have thoroughly found that they have thrived and enjoy so much. So the one thing I was going to first off ask is, I sort of touched on it in the other segment, but if you could pick any topic you still haven't touched upon on Two Disabled Dudes, is there a topic or a type of guest? I wouldn't want to say if you have dream guests as well, we can do some premonitions and manifestation right now, and you can put that out in the universe. But do you have topics or guests that you really still want to have on the show?
One that comes to mind immediately, Michael J. Fox. would
For
be
a
my
dream
number
guest,
one guest. He has a quote that I have on my wall, and I read it every day. We only can't if we don't. And I just it's one of those quotes that really speaks to me, in that we have one life. This is the time is now. Let's get it done, and we can do this if we just do it. And so anyway, that's one of the many things I would talk to Michael J. Fox about if he came on the show.
I like that a lot. That would be a great guest for you guys. Yeah.
I'll agree with that one. As for a topic, we haven't talked a whole lot about. It's come up at very surface level, but sex. I think that's something that maybe is taboo, in the world, right? No matter whether able-bodied or not. And I think it's more taboo in the disability community. So I do think, obviously we would need to bring on a guest for this one. I don't think Kyle and I can hash this out together. But we've mentioned it briefly, and we've had a couple of interviews where it's barely scratched the surface. But I do think the world of sexual activity and how to manage that with your disability would be a good topic for us to touch on.
Yeah, Sean, you mentioned that it's sensitive, and it makes me nervous just thinking about it. But I also recognize that those are the best topics that are gonna make our blood pressure and our heart rate go up, and just trying to figure out how to approach it, right? And that's when a good conversation is gonna come out. I like it.
I work with Gen Zs and millennials, and that's what they talk about all the time on our Instagram feed. We constantly get those. So I have a whole age demographic who would thoroughly appreciate if you had that as a topic on an episode. Guaranteed.
Good to know. All right.
I know on our end, if I'm going to manifest it, because I'm with you guys. So I figured if anyone's going to manifest it, it would be for us to say it. I'll say it with you guys. I've always wanted to have us do a panel where we bring people on with the same diagnosis, but it's all different variations of the same diagnosis, because I think that's something in the chronic illness space, the people I have the most similar issues with when it comes to my health and my chronic illnesses are people who don't have the same diagnoses as I have. And so I've always found it fascinating to have a whole panel of people that are in the blind and visual impairment community and showing what it actually means to have a spectrum of a chronic illness or a disability, and how they all go about different parts of their day or handle situations differently. Because I think for the support network realm of people who even listen or watch our show, that the non-disabled and the quote unquote healthy population, they really would understand really learning what that variation looks like, that it is never really one size fits all when it comes to a diagnosis. I mean, especially for you guys as well, you have the same diagnosis, but I imagine things can be even different for the both of you at times too.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, for an example, to case in point for you, Kyle uses a wheelchair full time, and I don't. I use a walker, and I use a wheelchair on vacation or if I'm going to Disneyland or something. But even just in our stages of life, we're the same age, but we deal with different issues or challenges and symptoms differently every day.
Yeah, and then even beyond that, like, all right, we're at the same age, but we're diagnosed, we're in the similar stage of life, but some kids with FA are diagnosed at age 5, and as you can imagine, their their progression and prognosis is much different than what we're dealing with, and so there is a huge spectrum of how FA specifically affects people, but also rare disease in general. And I think it's always important for us to keep in mind, and something we always try and keep in mind in our show is that we're talking about issues that relate to people dealing with rare disease in lots of different stages and a huge spectrum of ways it affects us.
Yeah. No, that's very, very true. I thank you for mentioning that. I appreciated that. I was going to mention too, toward like a different side note of I mentioned this at the start, that our engineers on our show would love that you guys had such professional podcasting equipment in comparison to some of our other guests that we've had. So I didn't know, are there things that you use that you would suggest to people who are doing podcasting or are getting into it that have been equipment pieces or things that you guys use? Because you obviously, you're in 2 different states as well. So that has made it easier and more accessible for both of you to do podcasting.
I think the most useful thing, we both use Apple computers, and the GarageBand software is something that we use all the time, and it was free. It comes standard on all Apple computers, and so that's been a huge one, I think, for both of us.
And we both recognize there are probably more dynamic editing software out there, but GarageBand works
it's
just fine. And both of us are really kind of afraid to do anything different because we have no idea how any of it works. But we taught ourselves GarageBand. We've gotten used to it. We know what to do, and we can navigate around it. So I would agree with you on that one. Another, 2 more elements. Zoom has been a game changer, and as terrible as the pandemic was and has been, there are a few life lessons that come out of it, right? I think for all walks of life. And I would say Zoom is a benefit. And the realization that we don't always have to be face-to-face, and even for a doctor's appointment or whatever it may be. So Zoom has been a game changer for us. And also Google Drive. Gotta have some, whether it's Google Drive or something else, a cloud, both or all individuals have access to in real time, has definitely made it easier.
Yep.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned things that are accessible for people to use when they're starting out as well. It's always that we'll always hear for first-time podcasters, it's the list of equipment you should buy and all of these things that I will need to learn. And everyone knew I was not tech savvy when we started the show up 5 seasons in. I'm still not. So I like that you mentioned things that would be easy for people to find or gain access to, and just start trying and seeing if they even enjoy it. Do you have advice for people? Like, what would be that first piece of advice for a new podcaster that's starting out that wants to set up their own show? What would you tell them?
I'd say along the same vein, just start. Don't worry about the quality of microphone or the how much money you might spend on a piece of equipment. Really, sure, you could spend 10 grand and get the best stuff, and then realize you hate doing it. Or then realize that it really doesn't work for your schedule to do it regularly. So our best course of action was we just started. Like Kyle said, we had no idea what we're doing. The biggest challenge for us when we first started playing with the idea was, how in the world do you do it not in the same room?
Yeah.
That was mind-blowing to us. Like, how is that even possible? And, we practiced, and funny story, maybe, I don't know, not funny. Our very first episode, I want to say it's titled or numbered 000 on our feed. we recorded that 4 times, 5
Yeah.
times,
Oh
several.
my gosh.
Yeah.
We recorded, we listened, we hated it. We tried again, we tweaked this, that, and the other, and it just took time finding our rhythm, if you will, our flow. And if you were to go back and listen to first episode versus today, it is night and day difference. We still aren't great, but there is a lot of difference between now and then. And there's, in the business world or self-improvement world, people say it all the time, if you wait for perfection, you'll never start. You'll never get there. You'll never do a thing. So who cares about being perfect? Just start. See what happens, and it'll all come together at some point.
I like that.
My biggest thing when I think about starting it is to get really clear on the purpose. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we face a lot is like, what are we going to talk about next? What's our next topic? Right. And it always comes, but we spent some time with a good friend of mine in the beginning, getting very clear about our values and our mission and our vision. Who is our audience? Who do we want to talk to? That kind of stuff. And I think that serves us even to this day. We, occasionally we'll go back and revisit that and be like, you know what, do we need to change this a little bit now that we've had, has our audience changed? Has our vision changed over the time that we've been doing this? So I'd say get real clear about your vision for your show.
Yeah, I really like that because that's so true. Is so many people assume podcasting is just you like talking, or you like talking to people, or just talking by yourself. And there's a lot of production that goes into producing an episode, and questions, and having guests especially. And if you're able to really know and do that legwork ahead of time of it, you might realize that this isn't either something you might not like, or really then it will sharpen the way that you would then prepare for episodes, besides just getting on the mic and winging it, which I know we have had numerous guests that has been their style of being interviewed as well. But that is really, I like that you both kind of touched on 2 different parts of getting into podcasting, because that would be good for people to know. And I know the other thing I was going to mention before we ended this segment was, do you have podcasts that you either like listening to as listeners, and is that in the same do you like listening to podcasts in the same category as 2 disabled dudes, or do you totally prefer to just go in, I'm going to listen to true crime, it has nothing to do with what our show is like, or it might be, depends. So what would you what would you want, what are things that you like when you're listening to other podcasts?
I use listening to totally unplug. And so, I listen to the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast just because it's fun. It's a lot of times it's really dumb, and it's, it's mindless, but it's funny. And I love that, to just be able to unplug and, let Conan take it and make me laugh.
I like that. Yeah.
I'd say I listen to very little podcasts that are in our same category, if you will. Once Upon a Gene is one that I'll listen to every now and then. F.E. Parks is a good friend of ours. But Smartless is on my playlist. At the Table with Patrick Lencioni is on my playlist. And Business Made Simple. So my go-tos tend to be improvement, self-improvement, or career development kind of. I'd listen to a lot of that stuff. So almost all the Dave Ramsey podcasts I've listened to regularly, or every couple of months I'll binge a few episodes. So I enjoy that kind of stuff.
I like that. Yeah, we'll always say that we listen to other podcasts in our category. A lot of our volunteers will, because they say it's guest shopping for us. That's what they're like, oh, we're just guest shopping for InvisiYouth. Don't worry. I'm like, okay. As long as you listen to ours, you can listen elsewhere. But no, I like that it's similar. It's finding what you like in podcasts and what you like to listen to. And I always I don't listen to shows that are in the same category as ours as often, unless I know the guest or the host. But I like listening to long form podcasts because I like to see how other hosts do it for 60 minutes or their 2-hour episodes. I always like to see that kind of marathon hosting and listen to it and how other people will do it, to kind of up my self hosting and how that works too. So I always really that's similarly I like to kind of find those shows and then give those a try. And our listeners know that if you've known this show for a while, you know that we've reached our halfway point of InvisiYouth chat sessions. And before we get to everyone's favorite segment of the show, where I get to take a break from talking, we like to always thank you guys for listening or watching InvisiYouth chat sessions. We do always pop our donate link on the screen and mention it because all of our programs and resources we provide every month are for free for all of the teens and young adults in the 8 different countries we work in, for them to have access to all of our guide sheets and our glossary, our audio files, which is separate to our InvisiYouth chat sessions, and our Galaxy Hub and our volunteer program that we do monthly. We provide all of those for free so that young people can really figure out their own lane of success and joy in their life and the non-medical aspects of it. So all of your donations, 100% of them, goes towards helping to fund every resource that we provide monthly. So we always thank you guys if you are able to donate, if you're able to share the donate, or just subscribe to our show. It helps keep our lights on and keeps us being able to provide shows like InvisiYouth chat sessions every month. So we really do thank you for that. And without further ado, it's your favorite segment. It's my favorite segment. It's So That One Time.
So that one time.
You all know the drill by now. I get to relax and drink my coffee and let Sean and Kyle tell us a life story. So I'm going to give you guys both your mics and you can tell us a story.
So we've always had this disdain for taxis compared to rideshare like Uber and Lyft. And it's because of a few things. And one of the stories is that, I was coming out of the train station one time in Washington, D.C., and there was a taxi immediately available, like right there, just like shining in the sun. And I was like, all right, sweet, this is my chance. So I just got right in, right? Well, I'm pretty sure the guy pretended not to speak English. I couldn't communicate with them very well. And so, I told him where to go, 106 A Street. And so we get there and I look out the window and I'm like, wait, this is not the place we're supposed to be. And he's like, yeah, this is what you told me. This is where it is. And he starts taking my wheelchair out of the trunk and he puts it on the curb. And I'm pretty sure I have no choice but to get out and stay with my wheelchair. So I get out and I'm sitting on the ground because my wheelchair is like the frame and then the 2 wheels. They're just sitting there. It's not put together. So I'm sitting on the ground and he peels out and takes off. And it turned out that in Washington, D.C., there's like A Street Northwest and A Street Southeast. And so there's like 4 different, portions of the city. And I give him the wrong address or he got whatever. It doesn't matter. So I'm sitting there and I summon an Uber on my app. The guy shows up in like 5 minutes. He's super nice. He helps me with everything. He takes me to exactly where I need to go, and that was it. But it was one of those times when we're like, all right, there are certain tools that we should always stick to. And so I haven't used a taxi cab since.
I remember specifically talking about that particular incident on our show, and I gave Kyle such a hard time for even thinking about using a taxi. And I don't mean to rag on taxi drivers. It's just a different level of service ultimately.
Yeah.
People, generally speaking, taxi drivers feel, to me, rash and kind of cold-shouldered, and there are plenty of Uber drivers in the same boat, but I've found more often than not, Uber and Lyft drivers are a little more flexible, a little more gracious, and maybe a little more human. So the flip side of the Uber Lyft stories would be the uncomfortable conversations that you have. I feel like with taxis, it's really easy to do your own thing, make a phone call, and basically tell your driver, well, you don't have to tell them. They just mind their own business and you do your own business. But sometimes other drivers are like, oh, hey, how's your day? Where are you from? What are you doing? What's your name? Why are you in a wheelchair? And the questions never end. And one of my experiences with Uber are very similar, but not quite that extreme. We're driving to the medical center where I had an appointment, and my driver was very interested in why I was going to UCLA at the med center and what I was dealing with. And he kept asking questions about this, that, and the other. And eventually it started to offer suggestions like, oh, have you tried juicing? Have you tried, it just goes down this list of, do you pray? Do you fast? Do you meditate? These different things. And in my head, I'm like, just drop me off. I just want to get there. And there was one time, the driver basically pulled over on the side of the road and turned around at me and said, "Can I pray with you?" And I have nothing against faith and religion or prayer, but I was on mission. I had to be somewhere at a certain time. And I'm like, I want to go home now. Anyway, to bring it all to a close, we have some dear friends who also produced the Ataxian film that you mentioned early on that have agreed to work with us to produce a short 5-8 minute entertaining film based on that story, but also finding it entertaining, but to also help educate and to bring some really valuable points to the surface. And fingers crossed that's available sometime soon.
That would be very important. I mean, the only taxis I've had are New York City taxis, and those drivers might be a New Yorker thing and not a yellow cab driver thing. That's just not social communications, not really their priority in the yellow cab world. So no, that's I would have been like, how short of a prayer is it? Is it 2 verses? But no, I would really be I'll look forward to seeing you guys mentioning that later on. That would be really fun to watch, actually. Definitely. And ending so that one time we're going to go into our final segment with Sean and Kyle. It is Empower with Laughter.
Empower with Laughter.
Similar to the title, Empower with Laughter is when our guests get to go through how they find empowerment for themselves in different things that they do in their daily life. So instead of me just going straight and asking questions about podcasting, I have to ask questions about cycling, because this is just so not my lane of what I am familiar with at all. So I wanted to know for both of you, how did that become really prominent for both of you guys getting to do it? And what does it bring in terms of empowering yourself or the other people around you, that you see that it kind of feeds off of people when you're cycling with others, that they're really enjoying it too? What do you get from it, and what do other people get from doing it too?
Well, my introduction to cycling was, I mean, in a way, it was kind of forced, because I was trying to figure out a way to keep riding my bike and keep moving under my own power, as it became more and more difficult to do so because of Friedreich's ataxia. And I found a recumbent tricycle, a 3-wheeled bike, and I saw it online, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I can do that. And I found a dealer and started riding. And the minute I sat down, I felt an amazing sense of freedom, that I could go down to the end of the block without the fear of like falling over or running out of energy. And it was just, and you know what? I get that feeling still every time I sit down on my trike and go for a ride. And right now I want to get out there. Like, I always would rather be riding my trike. And sorry guys, I'd rather be doing that than talking to you guys. But so that was my initial, intro to it. And then realizing that there's lots of other people who love it for a very similar or even a different reason. But whatever, that's the thing that brings us together, and that I love doing with a lot of my friends, and with my dad. Like, I don't know if I would be spending so much time with my dad if we didn't both, love to ride our bikes. So, and actually, I don't even know if he loves to do it. No, he does. He has to, but he also does like it, I think. So
I think Kyle makes a good point. We ride because we can. There are a lot of things we can't do. We can't run. Going out and playing football or basketball probably is not something we're going to be doing anytime soon. Kyle was my inspiration. We met a few weeks after I was diagnosed, and he talked about doing a bike ride as a fundraiser. And I'm like, I want to help. So I went out and bought a bike, and I've been riding ever since. Granted, I don't ride half as much or even a quarter as much as Kyle. It's his identity for sure. But that sense of community, being able to go out and be on your own, freedom, feeling the wind in your hair or face, and inspiring other young people. That's probably the coolest thing. When we do a ride or a fundraiser for about Ataxia or an event, there's families that were just diagnosed a few months ago or, near term, and their kid wants to do something. And triking or hand cycling, that's something a lot of people can do that would be hard, the traditional route, right? So it just gives empowerment, I think, to when you see other people doing it, and like Kyle said, you think to yourself, I might be able to do that. And you give it a shot, and next thing you know, A, you found something you enjoy, and B, you're proving to the world that you still got something in you.
Yeah, I like that, because I know what I was gonna ask is, I always will hear from our community who cycle in all different capacities is they get something out of it when they do it alone. That's totally different from when they're doing it in a group and they're cycling in a group, or if they're fundraising. I'll always hear that they're like, it's the one kind of sport or activity I can do that if I'm alone, I can do it where I'm focused and I'm thinking, I'm just focused on this, and I can turn everything else off and just focus on riding. But if I'm in a community, it's fun and we're laughing and I'm trying to overtake my friends around corners, and it becomes like a whole other experience for them, which I think is really nice, for especially from my background with me getting injured as an athlete, and that was a big part of my identity. Sports was never brought up to me again until I interviewed who would become one of our celebrity ambassadors, and she was a Paralympian. And she had mentioned, well, I'm surprised you never tried adaptive sports. And I went, well, it would have been nice after 12 years of being chronically ill. Nobody even mentioned that was an option to me. And I find it so interesting that people can get into it. And what for you guys, is there advice you would give to young people who that fear of I'm nervous of hurting myself, or I already have a chronic illness and I'm living with my disability. I don't want to try to push beyond what I'm physically capable of or what I'm being told I'm capable of doing. How do you kind of get into that mindset, or would encourage people to kind of move past that?
My practical advice would be to find an adaptive sports program in your area, especially for cycling. It's not hard to find like a cycling clinic or a group that gets together and does adaptive cycling. They probably have, hand cycles or other kinds of equipment that you can borrow, and you can dip your toe and you can see if you get that feeling of empowerment, or you get the feeling of, this is just not for me. I need to find other ways to spend my time. Right. And so, trying it out, I think, is the best way to go.
Yeah, someone's thing may not be cycling, and that's okay. Maybe their thing is drawing or music or painting. I have no idea. The sky's the limit. So along the lines of finding a program in your neighborhood or close by, explore. There's no pressure to be the guy on the bike or at the gym or on the court. Find what works for you. Be safe. I will say, you make a good point, Dominique. It's very important that we don't put ourselves in harm's way. I do think some risk is okay and important, but yeah, you don't want to put yourselves in harm's way on purpose if you don't have to. Find something that works for you and get good.
Yeah, no, definitely. I always say it's like having the rails up when you're bowling, but I always said I had both rails up in the beginning, but now I just kind of dropped one. So I'll always try, but I know that there's the one buffer there for me that I'm now I always joke now I'm professionally chronically ill for as many years as I have been. So I now have enough experience to know when my body's reached its limit, and I can go, okay, now we need to tailor it back a bit. This won't work any longer. And the one other thing I was going to ask too was, what would be a piece of advice that if you were wanting to work on a project, I always will hear a lot of young people saying, I don't want the work that I'm doing to lose the fun that it has. I still want to enjoy it in its longevity of picking a career lane, and it's just going to feel very monotonous or repetitive after a while. Or even if you got into podcasting, and how do you make sure it retains the enjoyment and fun in something, even though you're doing the same thing or the same kind of work project over and over again?
That's something that's really hard, I think. I love building things from the ground up, like Red Ataxia or the podcast, when we first started. And at some point, you're right, even with the podcast, we really do love to do it. But at some point, it's work. You got to grind it out. And maybe it's just, trusting that we love this thing. And we need to grind it out to get to the next opening where it's going to fuel our soul and we're going to want to keep doing it over and over again. So I think maybe it's just getting through those times, because there are ups and downs of everything, right? And I think including your enthusiasm for what you do, and just keeping that in mind, I think is important.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add. Definitely laughter and having fun is important to me. And I try to find ways to do that on a regular basis. but I can't say that I have a specific routine or a resource that I lean on. I will say that when I get to a point where I'm not enjoying it, in fact, Kyle and I, we've had that conversation at least once, and I'm just real about it. I'll tell him what's frustrating me or what's driving me nuts or what makes it not enjoyable. And he can either agree and say, yeah, okay, maybe it's time, or he can help me see a different perspective. So I guess to Kyle's point, to keep that perspective, it's good to bounce your ideas and frustrations off somebody you trust and evaluate. Maybe it's time to move on, or maybe it's time to buckle up and work through that period that Kyle mentions.
Yeah, it's really good points, because it's not always easy to continuously, we'll always say, to have fun doing work 10 years, 20 years into a project. You always want to have that initial spark sustain itself. And sometimes that's just not a viable option at all times. So,
and I don't think it's anything in life besides maybe parenting that you have to do. Shoot, the president of the United States, if they wanted to stop doing that, they could. They walk away. It's okay. Somebody else will figure it out. Somebody else will do it. Granted, if you're a mom, you're probably stuck with that job. But anything else, it's fine. Find something else.
I love that. I was gonna ask another question, but I just liked that answer way too much, Sean, to go with another question. I want to thank you both so much for being our guests on the podcast today. I had an absolute blast getting to not just hear the two of you talk like I would on listening to two disabled dudes, but getting to actually now talk back to you and you actually answer me. So this has been thrilling for me. I've had so much fun with the both of you, and I want to make sure that our listeners and viewers get to find you both on social media and find two disabled dudes. So where can people reach you guys?
You can reach us on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is 2DE Podcast. Facebook is 2 Disabled Dudes. Our website is 2disableddudes.com. And we're on all the podcast platforms, 2 Disabled Dudes.
Fantastic. And as always, you guys can find InvisiYouth on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and YouTube at InvisiYouth, and InvisiYouth chat sessions on all podcast platforms as well. And if you did our due diligence at the top of the episode and you hit our subscribe button, then just go over to 2 Disabled Dudes and hit their subscribe button as well. That would be a double appreciation for the whole episode. And thank you, Kyle and Sean, again, so much for being on the podcast. I had an absolute blast getting to chat with you both.
Same.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you guys again for listening and watching, and I will speak with you soon. Bye, everybody.